English-speaking countries in our region, and yesterday we had this webinar for Latin American countries. Based on yesterday's experience, we have made some small changes to the agenda. So we will have 3 initial presentations that will cover an overview of the process of updating the system of national accounts, which will be presented by colleagues from UNSD and ECLAC Statistic Division, after which we'll have a half-hour round of questions and comments and a short 10-minute break. After the break, we will have a presentation by ECLAC on the current status of national account statistics in the region and 3 experiences of countries that are actively participating in this revision process. To begin with, we will have the participation of Mr. Ivo Javinga, Assistant Director, Chief Economic Statistics Branch, who will give a welcome speech on behalf of UNSD. Please, Ivo, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much, Claudia. Again, let me also thank Rolando, but also Philemon Harrison for giving me the opportunity to be part of this very important launch of a series of seminars around the update of the system of national accounts. And thank you both for contributing to the development of the program going forward. I also would like to not only thank your teams for organizing this important sort of series of events, and I will say a little bit more about that. But I also would like to thank my own team, particularly Michael Stenger, who have done quite a bit of work on bringing this all together in a format that I hope will last after 2025 and will be an infrastructure that we can rely on also moving forward in the implementation of the new SNA and maybe also other manuals that we would like to bring more forward in our discussion with the countries in the region, led by the regional commission and regional agencies, in this case ECLAC and CARICOM. This is, of course, very important that there was a decision to bring the CARICOM countries together in an English-speaking environment, not only for the language, but I think also, Philemon and Rolando, because of the fact that there are some special, conditions of these countries. They're smaller, they're vulnerable, they have a particular sort of demand. They may have different priorities, but also in terms of resources. So we should think about, the implementation of a major international standard as the system of national accounts, particularly also in that context, and see the overall sort of applicability of a system in that region. Let me indicate to colleagues to welcome you that this is part of a broader, as I said, outreach program that we now have launched that accompanies the more humble sort of effort that we did with the 2008 SNA. In those days, we reached out to the countries when we were ready with our issue notes, and then we asked your reflections on these recommendations as we made forward. And then we agreed at the Statistical Commission on these international recommendations, and then finally the book itself, the standard. And then we would go into an implementation mode, which could take quite some long time. And even now, we're still working on the 2008 SNA update, and some countries, still has to move to the 2008 SNA manual. So what we thought we should do differently this time round is that early on we engage with the countries and with the regional agencies that reflect the closeness of our agencies to the countries, to reach out to them and having a debate and a dialogue around these forthcoming recommendations as we move forward in formulating them, so that when the documents come to you in terms of global consultation, you are better prepared in considering these elements. But there is more. So it's not only about the evaluation and let's say information sharing around these guidance notes, There's also an understanding that we should start to understand better, can these guidance notes actually be implemented in these countries? So it is also about an assessment of capability. So along with these outreach seminars, there will be a dialogue with the countries to better get an assessment systematically in databases that we develop about the capacity of countries to actually implement these recommendations. But at the same time, there is also an outreach from our side at the regional agencies and also at the global agencies like my own. But I should also say with our close partners with World Bank and IMF and OECD and Eurostat, to actually see whether there will be early sort of experimentation and testing of some of these recommendations going forward, for which we need volunteering countries. And of course, when we talk about the Caribbean countries, that should be accompanied with support, both from the regional agencies as well as from ourselves here in New York to actually support that, as well as maybe from the World Bank and IMF with CARTEC in the Caribbean region, and also World Bank having a big program. And not to forget also countries like Canada that have big program in the Caribbean islands that we can start to bank on maybe seeing that we can, get volunteering countries along with their implementation to participate in some of the experimentation and testing, so that we can also go back to the Commission having a debate about the capabilities of countries like in the Caribbean to actually consider these matters. Now, going forward, there is a much more sort of broader understanding that we want early implementers going forward towards developing and approving the new standards, as well as then having a little bit of a head start in the implementation of the new manual based on practical experience as we have accumulated them going forward. So in that sense, as you may have understood, we have changed the way we want to go about it, and we hope that you would appreciate that. Now, this can only be successful, and then I stop, if the regional agencies like regional commissions and Philemon from CARICOM and the countries themselves are actively participating and indicating their priorities. So it is really an effort that has to rely on your interest in the program as we develop it, but your active participation also there going forward. And this active participation is also in the future sort of theories of seminars that we would like to do much more thematically, also with the Caribbean, with CARICOM in consultation with Rolando, deciding on what would be the priorities that we have to look at if we look at the very thematic areas that we are now addressing in the system of national accounts. Now, having said all that, this is about the system of national accounts. You may know that there are other manuals being updated, so we will make excursions to balance of payments, which is updated at the same time as the system of national accounts. But I would also like to indicate that now also the international trade manuals are being updated, as well as the international classifications are being updated, always the same target date of 2025. So that seemed to be a lot of work, but there's also a lot of overlap and synergies in the research for these international standards. So the aspect of consistency and implementation more broadly across the economic statistics standards that I just mentioned is an important discussion as we take them forward. So it is an interesting time. Interesting time in Chinese means that you have to do a lot of work. You have to bring a lot of research forward in that. So we will do that and make the best of that interesting time to actually work together and build further on our statistical systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivo, for your motivating words. And now I would like to give the floor to Rolando Campo, the Director of the Statistic Division at ECLAC. So Rolando, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia. And I just want to say hello to Ivo, and thank you, Ivo, to be here with us, and to my dear friend Philemon Harrison from CARICOM, that we work very close in the region in this regard. And colleagues, dear colleagues from the National Statistical Offices, Central Bank, international organizations, United Nations agency sponsored programs, all of you dear national account experts in general. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all this afternoon to the first webinar of experts dedicated and planned with the aim to introduce the series of regional webinars within the framework of the updates of the process related to the System of National Accounts 2008, the SNA 2008. So the continuous update of the methodologic manuals and the general recommendation for measuring macroeconomic aggregate is a real challenge for the international statistical community, particularly in our desire to see these measurements reflecting the change and challenges that occur in the economic field and in the reality of the countries worldwide, and of course, in our region and in the Caribbean. In this sense, macroeconomic accounting standards, such as the System of National Accounts, Balance of Payments, Manual of Public Finance Statistics, Manual of Monetary and Financial Statistics, among others, are periodically updated to show this change in the economy, being crucial importance the involvement of all countries and in particular small island developing states, as we are having. That's why we are having this particular webinar for the Caribbean, especially the update of the manual of the system of national accounts and balance of payments. The United Nations Statistics Division, in coordination with us, with ECLAC, plans to hold a series of thematic webinars by region with the purpose of inform the collectors on the progress of the SNA and BPN update program, to introduce the concept collection main topics in order to encourage and inform participation in the global consultation of the guidance of guides, to collect and verify the information by evaluating the baselines, and in particular on the statistical capacity of the countries to implement the new recommendation, as Ivo mentioned. So we have to take care in this regard the different areas in the country and in the regions. Additionally, to gather the user opinions of new recommendation, explore potential volunteers for the pilot application, as Ivo mentioned too. So to identify potential volunteers for the pilot application of this recommendation, and to gather information of the implementation plans of the countries. The general idea is to have a wide-ranging participation from the international community, national accountants, and experts to share their experience on the topics selected for each of these thematic meetings. This initial webinar is focused on the overview of the 2008 SNA update program, and will be followed this year by 2 specific thematic meetings. And we encourage you and appreciate your active participation. It is very important for us to come with all the participation from all the Caribbean islands in these particular meetings and webinars. I hope this meeting allows and create an open space to exchange and discussions of the session of the scheduled agenda. In this order, we settle an instance for questions and comments after the presentation of the colleagues from New York and our colleagues from the staff division here in ECLAC, as well as the experience of the countries of the region that are already participation in the SNA revision process, which are Argentina, Costa Rica, and Jamaica. On this panel, a pandemic situation, and you know very well, due to the restrictions imposed by COVID-19 pandemic, the meeting will take place virtually. But the virtuality carries great challenge, but at the same time, it has allowed us the participation of many more colleagues from countries and institutions, which certainly it's a great contribution to the discussion of the above mentioned topics. Finally, I just want to give some logistic recommendation and for the following of this webinar. Please, we will beg you to keep your cameras and microphones on, off, please, and raise your hand to ask for the floor. Or even instead, you can put your comments and questions in the chat if you want to. Also, it is important to inform you that this meeting will be recorded. Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to have your presence, and we hope that the work agenda that we have prepared will contribute to the purposes pursued by your national account offices, as well as to serve as an informative forum about the activities that we are being carried out in the international context to further motivate your participation. I want to thank you for your participation and look forward to hearing you about the experience. And thank you very much. And I give you over to you, Claudia. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rolando, for your motivating words too. And I'm very glad now to have here our colleague from CARICOM, Mrs. Philomen Harrison, Director Regional of Statistics, who welcome us with opening words. Philomen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia. As I indicated, I would share this slot with Kevin Sears from our office, who would really give the welcome. But just to quickly say a brief hello to everyone. Ivo, well, of course, we go back a very long way, Ivo. And of course, Rolando, Claudia, right? And of all our colleagues from CARICOM and those that are with us from Latin America, right? So a warm hello to you all. Well, very warm, I have to say. We were talking about the heat a while ago. And to make 3 brief points before I hand over to Kevin. One, of course, is the fact, and has been noted, the whole issue of capacity constraints of the small countries of CARICOM that really impact in terms of implementation. So we could have as good a plan as ever, you know, a strategic plan for the implementation, but if you don't have the capacity, you know, which is a major issue with us, you know, it would impact how much we can do. And of course, in this regard, even as we talk about 2025, you know, we still have to be looking back at the 2008 SNA and to see that, you know, we probably have not gotten very far in terms of that, you know, so it is sort of catching up with us. Also, this pandemic that we are in, you know, and we do not know how long it will be with us. You know, there are so many unknowns about it. And through the context that it is also going to affect our economies moving forward. And affecting our economies means, again, that it's going to impact the resources that we would have, including in statistics, to do what we need to do. And last but not least, the fact that already impacted by the pandemic has been the population and housing census, which is now with us in the region. Now we are trying to do the 2020 round of population and housing census. You know, so moving forward in terms of you know, the activities, you know, of this 2025 program, we are going to be impacted by the fact that a lot of the focus would be on the round of population and housing census that countries are now trying to do starting this year and probably 2021 and may even be 2022. Depending on resources. So Claudia, if I may, I want to pass to Kevin to say a few words.
Of course, Kevin, please.
Hi, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity. All right, just to provide some context or background, you know, statistical harmonization is at the core of regional statistics programs work. It's important that members of the region are in sort of a way in sync with each other from a statistical methodological standpoint, such that the information that we produce is indeed comparable and lends itself to proper policy formulation towards the integration drive that is ongoing. And the importance of statistics harmonization is currently reflected in the placement of standards and harmonization as one of the 5 pillars on which our regional strategy for the development of statistics, the RSDS, is currently built. Beyond our regional borders, it's also important that we continue to position ourselves in such a way that our information produced allows for international comparison, thereby again highlighting the importance of work to be engaged in at this forum. So these are just a few issues or a few points why it's important that all the stakeholders in the region have an early understanding of the development of the new SNA, as this would likely contribute to a more proper, more efficient implementation of the same. Colleagues will recall that under the 9th and 10th EDF, the RSP engaged in meaningful work aimed at better understanding the importance of the SNA 2008 recommendations and the implementation or implications, for the regional economies. One can reasonably expect that similar undertakings will be conducted once this new SNA has been fully developed, and those can be conducted or might be conducted via projects in national accounts or through our centers of excellence or through the relevant technical working groups that are in place. So once again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look forward to the discussions to come on the issue.
Thank you, Kevin and Philomen, for these words. The CARICOM participation in this kind of activities are very important for statistics in our region. So thank you again. And let's move on to the first presentation with the overview of the 2008 SNA update process that will be in charge of Mr. Herman Smith, National Chief of the National Accounts Section in the UNSD. I don't know if he's with us.
Yes, I am.
Yes, of course. I haven't seen you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for the opportunity. I must say, I'm glad that I have the opportunity to speak again to our colleagues from CARICOM. I mean, it's a special region, and try to share my screen now. That's it. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Rolando and Philemon, for making this happening, and the collaboration with Michael and our UNSD team in general. I would also like to, apart from our colleagues from the Caribbean, also like to say thank you to our AEG members, Carol Coy from Jamaica, and Pedro Lines from Argentina, and Gabriela as well from Costa Rica, for joining us in this. So you could also see that it is a broader collaborative effort that we bring this information sharing session to you, and we are looking forward to the next rounds of seminars. Now, I will talk about the broader program, and Michael and other colleagues will provide some more details, so mine will be only an overview. Okay, so I mean, we know that the SNA gets updated every number of years since 1953, but it's not only the SNA; it's also the other macroeconomic standards, notably the balance of payments, government finance. But we also talk about the classifications, environmental accounts, and so forth. And we categorize these types of updates for these standards first into conceptual updates. We would like to change what we measure I think a typical example for now is the measurement of data and bring that element in. There are a few others as well. There may be methodological updates. Here, an example would be how you, the changes that you brought about in calculating financial intermediation services in the past. And then the third element is presentational updates. And here particularly, I think the elements of dealing with more detail, particularly in the supply and use framework, with global value chains, the globalization issues through that, also the supply and use table. So a presentation that is a bit different from what we had before. The sector accounts, some more detail as well. Now, the update process was initiated in 2020 by the Statistical Commission. And at that time, we envisioned a incremental research work to deal with particular issues. And the idea was that we would identify some conceptual issues that need to be addressed, but we would also seek the practical testing of those solutions. And through that is the development of guidance notes that we will, with iterations, improve. But although we had quite a good coordination for the 2008 SNA update with the balance of payments and others, the alignment of the macroeconomic standards for this round of updating is of particular importance. And also to get a broader user input into this whole process. The national accountants has long been accused of not looking, not presenting information to have better measures of well-being of people, the impacts on the environment and the like. So we are trying to look now also at extensions, household service work for own use, human capital, labor accounts, and the like. But more about that later. So once we have established some guidance on particular issues, we would then test these and consult these on these proposals, and then we will do the major update, and we are already in that process for 2025. Something that we are looking forward to for this particular update is to have an editing system that would allow us to make more incremental updates. We talk about the digitized version of the SNA, and through that also reinforce the communication on the SNA. Here we talk about the branding, having an environment where we can communicate better. Also support to developing countries. I mean, we don't want to mention it and here and now as well. Also mechanisms to support you there in terms of the implementation, and then also support in terms of human and financial resources. So these were the discussions that we had at the Statistical Commission at that time, and the work has been progressing quite a bit now, but more about that later. Now, how do we approach the update process? We have a three-pronged approach for that. First of all, it's the technical research area, where we have teams that are working on resolving the conceptual issues of particular elements that were identified, and then developed in guidance notes that either provide clarifications or interpretations or change to the SNA? Is it impacting on the central system, or can we put it in supplementary tables? And then the new element that we have now is to also test the recommendations. We call this testing also an early implementation process to support an easier implementation after the SNA is adopted. The second leg of our approach is broad consultations, and this series of seminars that we will have on a regional basis with countries, with our partners in here, is part of that broad consultation to bring to you the developments that's taking place in terms of the conceptual developments, but also to seek your inputs into the feasibility of these recommendations, and also to find provide inputs to refine the guidance. Apart from the seminar series, we will also circulate the guidance notes for global consultation. There are a few out at the moment, and in the coming weeks we expect more to come. The third element of the implementation program deals with the consistency between the macroeconomic standards. And here we went quite a long way to ensure that there's a close collaboration with elements that has an impact on, say, the balance of payments and the national accounts, where we have established joint task teams to look at conceptual issues and the conceptual development. So there's a very close coordination in terms of that development to ensure that there's an overall consistency between the SNA and, say, the PPM. Now, what are we trying to do with this update? I will list a few issues that may be relevant for us, and also relevant even in your region. I mean, you know the famous Irish case where they had this jump in GDP in 2015, but you also know that is basically a result of how multinationals can move their assets from one country to another, and so the whole globalized environment and the digital environment allow countries now or companies to move their assets around and the income streams from one country to another. So that's one element that we hope then to address through various issues related to M&Es and special purpose entities, intellectual property products, and how that gets transferred. I mentioned data before. It is an element that plays an important role in the production process today, and in various stages of the economy. And so we would like also to get a grip on this particular asset and how it impacts the accounts. I spoke about that GDP is not a well-being indicator it is because it's an overall average for the country. But how this income is distributed between, say, the households in terms of either the gender or the income groups is hidden in that element. So one element aspect that we will expand on in the SNA is also to allow us to do this analysis in terms of household income distribution, for example. So this is an example of where we will work on supplementary information. Everything is almost free. Many things are free through the internet. And how do we account for these free digital services? So that's one element that is important. I mean, and this is even for small countries like the Caribbean countries also important, because you have access to internet, so you are also making use of these digital services. So you may also want to be able to account for this. The contribution of human capital in the economy is only recognized through the compensation of employees. But I mean, just as a machine is being used in a production process for more than 1 year, so is the human knowledge being used. And we would like to also account for that. In this study that was done in Canada, almost half the human capital, almost half of all capital in the economy can be attributed to human capital. We also need to better reflect the interaction between the economy and the environment. That's the sustainability part. I mean, there are quite a number of developments that through this year is matured. There's quite a bit of practical experience in how to deal, for instance, with depletion, degrading issues, and we may also want to bring that into the SNA, and it is an important element for us to ensure that link is clear and of use for policymakers. And then an interesting element that we've never had before is how to account for renewable energy and renewable energy assets. So you can also think that, well, know that we will also expand on that particular element in the work. Cryptocurrencies goes up and down. People are getting rich, having invested in cryptocurrencies, and others lose their investments. But is it a means of payment? So that is something that we are closely looking at. I mean, here the financial asset aspects versus the digital aspect, how to account for that in the SNA. Informal economy or informal activities in countries, for many countries, important. I'm sure in your region it would also be. And one aspect of the informal aspects of informal activities in the economy is that we don't have a clear-cut definition of what the informal economy means. So so in this particular case, we have 3 examples here of Ethiopia, Benin, and Fiji. that states that the informal economy is between 10 and 60%. But we are not sure that those numbers are comparable. So we are also working towards this element in this SNA to also bring that in the SNA. And this work is carried out in close collaboration with the International Labour Organization to ensure that there's coherence in the guidance provided by the ILO and by the SNA relative payments. Well, we have a lot of national accountants around the table today, and we all know the peculiar terms that we use, but sometimes these terms makes it very difficult to communicate what the national accounts is all about. So we have a work stream that works on this particular issue to help us out in terms of the terms that we use, help us out in terms of how we compare the implementation status between member states. Also to look at the stages that are important for countries to have in national accounts. Now, this provides a broad overview of how these guidance notes are being prepared. We have several task teams that work on guidance notes that are being reviewed by the Advisory Expert Group on National Accounts and the Secretariat Working Group on National Accounts. We also foresee that we would have a consultation on these guidance, and that is where your inputs are very important to us. Eventually then this guidance note would be finalized, and it would then go into the SNA. This is a bit more detail, and I know that Michael will talk to this in more detail later on. Again, the guidance note has been drafted, it's reviewed by the various committees. It goes out for consultation, and this is also through this consultation process. We will also, not all guidance notes, but at least a number of them will be subject to experimentation and testing, which we call early implementation. After that consultation around, the committees, AEG, ISWG, and TOPCON, for instance, will endorse them, and if it's endorsed, it will be by both of these elements. These committees, it will go into the SNA or into the relative payments. Hopefully, divergent. There would not be a divergence, but if there are, we intend to resolve those issues, and if we can't resolve it properly, we will probably not introduce those changes to the SNA at this stage. Several topics are under consideration. You know quite well, globalization, digitalization, well-being and sustainability, the core elements that we started off quite some time ago. There are quite a number of cross-cutting issues and other issues that we would need to look at. We would, as I indicated, also look at communication issues. And then there are several financial issues that need to be addressed. For these, there's the list of task teams that were established. I can say that the globalization task team at the top, Islamic finance, communication, financial issues, Informal Economy are all joint task teams. So it has balance of payments, national accounts, GFS. We also have from the accounting world people that are participating in these task teams. So each of the task teams are served by secretariats, which are basically the international organizations. And there you can see on the right-hand side, at this stage, there's about 75 guidance notes that we are, that's in preparation for the national accounts part alone. And so we will send these guidance notes for consultation to you. In terms of the assessment and experimental estimates component of the program is, and I will only go over this very quickly because Michael will go into more detail, is that we feel that we need to have a view of the structural elements of the production processes of national accounts in countries. But for each of these guidance notes, there are also specific information that we require. So this baseline assessment will also take place to help us with the implementation of the feasibility of the recommendations. As I said, these experimental estimates will also help us with an early implementation. It will provide us with information about the impact of the recommendations on the compilation process. And I think Ivo already mentioned that we plan to have a central repository for this information so that we can share that with the countries, with regional organizations, CARICOM, for instance, ECLAC, also helping us there in capacity development work planning later on. So I have a few questions in terms of the SNA update, particularly what is your view on your main priorities and what is more relevant for your country? And we would also like to know if you are willing to participate in the global consultations and if there is anything that we can do to help you participate. At the end of the presentation, there's a website link where you can find a lot of information about the SNA update. If you have any questions, you can send us an email at the sna@un.org email address. So quickly again about the questions. What is your main priorities and what is more relevant for you? And your willingness to participate in the global consultations.
Thank you, Herman, for your presentation with the timeline and these challenging topics to be addressed in this SNA revision process. And for country participants, these final questions raised by Herman are very important to follow up and enrich this revision process. So thank you again. And now we will have Michael Stanger, a regional advisor of UNSD, who will talk about tastings and their research topic and the status of the guidance notes and the explanation of global consultations. Please, Michael, Philip, the floor is yours.
Hi, Claudia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you see my the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Thanks. Thanks again. Thank you, Herman, for being here and presenting the overview. My name is Michael Stanger. As Claudia said, I work with Ivo and Herman in New York as an interregional advisor for national accounts and economic statistics. I'll take about, I hope, 10-15 minutes at the most to go a little bit deeper on what Herman already said. So you will see some overlap, but I want to take some time in the main topics that are being under research and will be possibly part of the update, the SNA update. So again, I'll talk about the task teams and the guidance notes. So that's part of the process that Herman already showed. This is basically the backbone of the process, and it's for me, when I was a compiler, it was a kind of difficult to understand how the process would work, and this is what I'm trying to tell you through these slides. First of all, tell you that this is a global project, so it's the whole world trying to come together and agree on what are the main topics that need to be discussed, researched, and updated. So among the task teams and topics, we have contributions for more than 20 countries, and the service of secretariat is being provided by the international agencies. So this is key to me. The international organizations are helping to this process, are not driving this process. This is a country-driven process mostly. And we have experts not only from national accounts, but from six other different domains, like as we said, balance of payments, international trade, commodity prices, and GFS, and so on. This was said already. The technical research was based on the main priority areas, and those topics have been mentioned, and we will go in detail later, but basically includes globalization, digitalization, well-being, some cross-cutting issues, and some presentational and compilation issues. And the priority was based on the urgency of those changes. So Herman mentioned how fast the economy is changing, so we needed to react to reflect those changes. And second, to see how feasible they are. So that's a very strong concept nowadays for us. It's some conceptual developments might be brilliant, but are impossible to implement. So those will be left out because we need to be practical here. So the work streams, the task teams were created to address the issues that I mentioned before. Those issues were grouped into the titles that I gave you, and task teams were put together to resolve those issues. But those task teams are being somehow overseen by the AAG. The AAG is the advisory expert group of national accounts. So the task teams cannot do whatever they want. They are somehow overseen by the group of experts on national accounts. And the ISWGNA, this is the international organizations that are kind of overseeing the whole process, United Nations, OECD, IMF, World Bank, and Eurostat, are providing the secretariat, as Herman said. So these task teams are writing the recommendations through these guidance notes. So it's expected that the guidance notes will include not only the concepts, so they will research the concepts, but they should also come with practical guidance so we can implement what they are proposing, those recommendations. Again, this is a graph that you can see in detail later, but basically this is the joint kind of picture of how the guidance notes are organized. So on the left-hand side, the light blue is basically the priority areas that are exclusive to the national accounts. And the, I don't know what color that is, it's kind of purple, I guess. On the right-hand side is the priority areas that are exclusive to the balance of payments. And in the middle, there's most of the research topics that are joint between the balance of payments and the national accounts. Then the task teams, again, this is an elaboration of what Herman said. those are the task teams that we have, and they are chaired mostly by countries. And this is what I said, it's driven by countries. And Secretariat is being given or is being provided by the international organization. So if you want to take a look at this graph, we are showing here all the task teams and who is behind these task teams. And we have Jamaica, for example, and the World Bank in well-being and sustainability. And that's changing from Jamaica to Costa Rica, that is taking over that task team. Okay. So not only it's global and we have many countries. Another important point is that the update is not being written by a single person or two guys sitting in a room. This is a collaborative work, including more than 300 experts across all these task teams. So there's a lot of cooperation between different topics. Many of the topics that are being developed are intertwined. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. And also the consistency. So we have, as I said before, the balance of payments working together from the very beginning with the national account. So we are ensuring somehow some consistency. At this point in time, Herman mentioned these topics of research. We have way over 80. These numbers are a little outdated, but at that time, this was prepared for March this year. We had 11 SNA issues, exclusive to the SNA, 47 for the balance of payments, and 31 joint. We'll go to the 75, to the number 75 that Herman mentioned before. So the guidance notes identify the issues, the research, and those guidance notes should give us recommendations. And those recommendations should be clearly telling us, or should be clearly noted, whether they are affecting the central framework of the national accounts, or they will come as supplementary tables and satellite accounts. That's a feature of the guidance notes. So they should be classified, and really they should be clear on what the impact would be a priori. As I said, it's not only conceptual, but also we'll have to have some practical guidance and show some signs of a way to assess the feasibility of implementation. And then we'll have the experimentation and testing, but that Federico will talk about that later. But it's another component, a new component of this process. So I'll go through these slides and give you some examples regarding the main priority topics. So what's being considered within the digitalization task teams? So there we have like 7 or 8 or more guidance notes. Those will deal with, first, is how to show digitalization in the national accounts. And the approach that is being proposed is through what is called the digital supply and use table. It's not a supply and use table that is digital. It's basically a supply and use table that shows clearly what the digital activity and products are. As you know, services that are digital are hard to measure. So, and even those that are not digital are hard to measure, are hard to value, so hard to price. There will be guidance on how to value and derive volumes for these services. Herman mentioned again data. How do we value data? How do we value the asset? How do we value depreciation of that asset, and so on? There will be guidance on that. Again, the same example. The next 2 examples are free assets and free services. How those impact well-being, for example, and some other household impact on households. The crypto assets, there's no one definition. There are many crypto assets are coming up and dying and so on. So there has to be guidance of those. Artificial intelligence, again, so many discussions around what's going on with cloud computing and so on. So all these things are still part of the old concept of software, for example, but they have a different or a component that makes even harder to conceptualize and measure. Well-being and sustainability, this is a topic that we are trying to address. There will be guidance on how how can we generate distributional accounts, most devoted to the household sector, naturally, whether we should include the unpaid service work, that it's outside the boundaries now, should we put it in? Most likely that will come as a kind of satellite. During COVID, health and for example, education has come as a service within the house, and those are now highlighted and will be proposed how to deal with those. Human capital was mentioned also, and labor and education. That's a big that may have a big impact. That guidance note is coming out soon. So we invite you to take a look and read it. So that would imply that the labor accounts may have a new prominence within the accounts of the national accounts. Even a chapter might be proposed. Anti-environmental issues. Here there are way more guidance notes. Those are under preparation. There's a lot of discussion on how to value the assets and the environment, how to measure the depletion, and how we could incorporate that, the treatment of emission permits or tax systems to actually bring them into the system. Globalization, you might have been part already of one of the guidance notes on the valuation of export and imports. That's a guidance note that is already out. We want to strip out the multinationals and see how that impact in the whole economy. Maybe the island economies may have these M&Es there, or even the special purposes entities. So all those things that have an impact on activity or on the accounting of the activity. Factoryless production, Ireland. We talked about the Ireland and how this factoryless production may reflect just the movement of assets that are not produced assets. Also, global value chain and trading value added, that it's not new, but it's proposed to be included explicitly, and so on. Intellectual property products, moving frontiers. Informal economy. There's a task team producing 4 guidance notes, individual, but most likely those will become a single one, and that's basically trying to define a central definition and concept of what informal economy is and how we measure the cross-border transactions that fall within the informality, and the relationship, and this is a hot topic now, the relationship between the informal economy and digitalization and so on. And how do we present that? You might have seen countries presenting that explicitly, implicitly, and so on. There will be some guidance on how to go about that. Islamic finance, there's a recognition that it's just needs to be expanded and harmonized with the standard, so to speak, finance, and how we integrate the terminology used in Islamic finance for loans, deposits, assets, and so on, how we harmonize the usual or conventional FISM with the calculation of FISM within the Islamic finance. The same happens with the insurance within the Islamic finance that has those names that I didn't know before, Takaful and Retakaful. And also, this is something that Herman touched a little bit upon, the communication task team. There's a team working on these 3 topics: terminology, taxonomy, and alignment framework. So how this it's harmonized somehow, or at least consistent with the other international standards. But in terms of the terminology, even within the book today, you will see that there's some inconsistency. So we will have to deal with that, and that's what this task team is doing. So as I said, there's a group of experts writing the guidance notes. Once those guidance notes are overseen by the AG and the ISWGNA, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of work behind. Once those guidance notes are ready, they go for global consultation. This was mentioned. So that means that these guidance notes, these notes papers will be posted on the website along with the questionnaire. So the questionnaire will ask users what's their view on the recommendations, and if there's a preference for one of the recommendations, and if the proposals are acceptable or not. And this is basically the vehicle that we have as users to be part of this update. And this is our call to you. And it's part of our outreach effort to bring these guidance notes closer to the compilers. So this will be posted, and once it's posted, there will be a window of 60 days. I don't know if that number is still correct, Herman, but around 60 days, and then that period will be closed for consultations. And in the last presentation, there was a link at the end, and the link will take you to this page. This is the SNA update, the SNA page that we have at the UN, and there's a link to the update. If you see that dark green on the middle up, and that's that will take you to the link. It's a link that will take you to a specific web page or site with all the information regarding the update. And this light blue one on the right, if you go to that page, will take you to the consultations website. Also in that page, we have all the documents that have been discussed and presented during the AEG meetings. And in the middle, on the right-hand side, you see this link that I told you about the consultation process. So if you go to that link, basically you will find with time a page like the one that you have in front of you with all the guidance notes that are under consultation. When we took this screenshot, it was only the valuation of imports and exports that was open at that time. And if you click that, you will see that the paper is there, the questionnaire is there, and you can download the questionnaire and then send it back to us, and that will be also posted. Now, one of the issues that we're facing is that we had, as we showed, 35 priority research issues, 75 potential guidance notes. That was April this year. We haven't changed much since then. And we need to clear those, and then those have to go to global consultation. So the question is, in a period of 6 months or 8 months, we will be invaded by guidance notes that we need to review. So there were questions whether all the guidance notes need to go for consultation. The answer is yes, and if we could cluster or consolidate some guidance notes. So out of those 75, I mentioned some of them will be grouped, but they will come for consultation. So there's a lot of work ahead. Be prepared, plan accordingly, because your input is key. Well, I'll leave you with this page. You will see that there are a few guidance notes already there. Herman mentioned already, there are some that are coming out this month and maybe next month, but at least from now on, you will see a lot of guidance notes coming out for consultation. This process is going to take at least until mid-2022, maybe longer, until the decision is made. And we expect that both manuals, the SNA and BPM, will be being drafted, or will start being drafted by 2022, once the guidance notes are final. So the questions that we have here is related somehow to what Philemon said at the beginning, and I want to take 10 seconds what Ivo said also. We understand that there's a lot of work going on now, but since we are starting early, way before 2025, I think part of our efforts are geared towards taking advantage of all the work plans that you have from now on to 2025, 2024, whatever, and see if we can actually piggyback on those plans and add a little bit, some components of what we are proposing for the 2025 update, so they can be implemented along with the plans that you already have without having a massive change in the plans going forward. So we wanted to know, and I hope we can get some of your inputs. If there's any topic that is already being developed in your country, if you're approaching or you're being developed, if you already are compiling some climate-related thing or well-being, or and if so, which ones? And also, as Rolando said, we will have some webinars that are really specific to the topics that you choose. So if there are topics like globalization that are really key to your region or to your country, please tell us, because we will prepare the next thematic webinar based on what it's more important to the region, not to those things that will not have an impact on your work. Thank you. That's all from my side. Back to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Michael, for your very informative presentation. And again, these final questions put forward by our colleague for consideration by the countries will strengthen this review process. So we encourage you to tell us what is important for you. And now my colleague Federico Dorin, Regional Advisor of ECLAC, will refer to the initiative of this revision process in terms of assessment and experimental estimates and early implementation. Please, Federico, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia. I will share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen and we hear you perfectly.
Thank you. My presentation is about assessment and experimental estimates. I'm going to go through these first two slides quickly because we have already seen it before. Recalling again the three-pronged approach, the technical research, the broad consultation, and ensuring overall consistency. Inside the technical research, we have the task teams and the guidance notes. We are resulting the experimentation and testing in the countries is a novel element in the 2025 SNA. This is a novelty. Also, the guidance note life cycle. We have the guidance note draft by the task teams, and we have the committees, AG, Intersecretary Working Group on National Accounts, the BOPCOM. The function of these committees is to approve and to clearance the guidance notes. And we are highlighting again the experimentation and testing in the countries. Well, the assessment and experimental estimate component and its activities are built around the research and consultation streams of the SNA update program. The task teams and the guidance notes are the backbone of these activities and thus require a detailed planning with these steps: finalization of guidance notes and global consultation launch, rounds of webinars like this one today, desk work, centralized data gathering, baseline assessment, date commitments, planning ahead. And the last is experimental estimate reporting. Well, we have 4 principles: two-level testing, voluntary, and broad regional income level representation, and interinstitutional collaboration. The broad regional and income level representation, this involves the country's coverage must be broad in terms of income level, and the interinstitutional collaboration involves the national statistical offices and the international organization. The country selection, we have the baseline assessment as global as possible, The task team and international and regional bodies advise on potential countries where experimentation can be deployed. Countries' work plans. It is important to coordinate the updating of the SNA with the plans of each country. A final list of potential countries matched with pre-selected set of implementable guidance notes. Again, the AG and the Intersecretary Working Group for their selection and endorsement. Well, the baseline assessment is the starting line. We need structural information and specific information, the assessment tool and the criteria. Experimental and estimates is an early implementation. As Herman have mentioned, this is an assessment of the recommendation and user consultation. Reporting, gathering results is with a central repository. All these component will provide feedback to the guidance notes and ultimately to the SNA update. Close monitoring and country commitment is required. The early implementation is in order to know the impact of the recommendation. Well, the baseline assessment covers 2 points: information gathering, harmonization and sharing. Structural information is a collective effort, data sharing with data template, and specific information is a global consultation with webinars, collection forms. The second point is assessment with criteria and tool, under development and derived from the guidance notes. Information sharing, pool of candidate countries for experimental estimates. Requirements. We have 3 requirements. Selection of recommendation from the guidance notes need to be assessed. As we said, the task team proposes and the AG endorses. The second is baseline assessment with the global consultation, survey based on consultation, and desk assessment based on existing metadata. Experimental estimation and user consultation assessment, implementation guidelines to be developed, reporting and analysis. Well, when we have the country eligibility, information sharing, and the timeline is between June 2021 and July 2023. Some guidance notes builds on well-established practices and may not need to be piloted and any further. The guidance notes and their recommendations should be categorized with regards to their impact on the SNA central framework. For example, as Michael explained, we had 4 types. The type 1 is proposes a change to the 2008 boundaries. The type 2, it proposes a change to the 2008 core accounts. These first 2 are changes in the boundaries and in the core accounts. The type 3 proposes supplementary tables within boundaries, and the type 4 propose extended or satellite accounts outside the boundaries. The timeline. Regional workshop will start in the Q2, Q3 2021. Consolidation 2021. Consolidation of technical assistance activities to facilitate coordination. Guidance notes planning is key to achieve the objective of the assessment experimental estimates component with the time frame. Interinstitutional collaboration is a requisite for an optimal deployment in the assessment experimental estimate component. Information sharing, the feedback. The assessment experimental estimation component has a 2-year window. We are starting in June 2021 and we are ending in March 2023. Well, then the planning in terms of the guidance note is finalization, reporting the reports. The guidance notes clearance by the AEG meetings, and the guidance note implementation. Next steps, not necessarily consecutive. Assessment experiment estimate life cycle is a tentative planning based on the guidance note completion, guidance note subject to assessment and experimentation. Regional webinars, dates and topics, regional relevance. The topics have to be relevant for the region, obviously, and the country work plans collection and reporting. The baseline assessment is a global consultation. We need the surveys and metadata. This is in order to obtain an analytical report. The country selection and experimental estimates. Baseline assessment analysis. Advice mechanisms, country work plans. Proposes country list, endorsement, and experimental estimates. And the last step is a central repository, status follow-up, reporting and analysis, and responsibility. Well, in this slide, we have one example of the template. We have mentioned that the baseline assessment covers structural information. This is an example. We are asking for last benchmark compilation, next plan benchmark compilation, the SNA standard, the different approach from the GDP, production, expenditure, income, the supply and use table, the price availability, the regular sources, the integrated economic accounts, and the benchmark structural sources, for example, population census, agricultural census, industrial sector census, etc. Outreach. First, inception regional webinars, possibly 2 by region in order to cover the language. This is our case yesterday in Latin American and today in the Caribbean region. Broadcast the status of SNA update process, present the expected calendar of activities, promote the global consultation, inform countries about experimental estimate component, gather information on countries' developmental plans of national accounts. The second outreach is thematic webinars, ideally cluster topics to be covered by theme, implementation tools, or regional interest. Explore potential candidates for the experimental estimation, foster the consultation, and gather user and compilers' feedback. Complement the collection of specific data for the baseline assessment with global consultation forms. Well, and the last slide is the question for your consideration. Do you have development plans that may be used to include some of the new issues to be implemented? Would you consider volunteering to be part of the early implementation of some guidance notes recommendation as experimental estimates? If so, which ones? Would your authority support these developments? One explanation, these questions are meant to gain an understanding on the potential ability to engage the assessment experimental estimation component and do not constitute a commitment. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Federico, for this presentation, which shows a new way of conducting the SNA review process, since it incorporates baseline assessment and experimental estimation, which will improve the implementation of the new recommendation. And based on the final question raised in this presentation, it will be of great interest to know your willingness to participate in this testing process. Thank you again, Federico. And now our colleague from CARICOM, Marisa Ramotar, will conduct this round of comments on these 3 previous informative and interesting presentation. Marisa, the floor is yours, and I hope that all countries could comment on this presentation we have.
Good afternoon, everyone. Marissa Ramatar from the CARICOM Secretariat here. First of all, I think my job, as Claudia mentioned, is just to coordinate in terms of the questions, and we've heard. I must thank the presenters for the questions they had, that they asked, sorry. And
yes,
some of the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I was about to just refresh some of the information that we've just learned, so that if you have any questions at this time, you would have heard about the overview of the update of the 20 SNA process, including the three-prong approach. Some of the issues that they'll be looking at. You heard about the guidance notes and some of the questions that they raised. I'd like to just remind you, some of them would be what would be the main priority areas or issues for your country? Do you plan to participate in the global consultation? I believe we also had questions related to, let me just check back here. Are there any or some of the topics already being developed in your country? Which ones? Which topics would you like to be covered in more detail in your in the webinars that they're planning? And of course, do you have any developmental plans that might be used or that might be used to include some of the new issues to be implemented? And would you consider volunteering to be part of the early experimentation of some of the guidance notes recommendations? If anyone has any comments or questions, if you can just indicate by raising your hands, or I know there's a chat option as well.
Yeah, but I don't see any.
Yes, I'm looking as well to see if I see. I don't know if anybody had any clarifications regarding the Dr. Harrison. I'm seeing Dr. Harrison's hand. She has her hands raised. Dr. Harrison, at this time, do you have a comment or a question?
I have a comment, but I would like the countries to go first.
Okay. Are there any countries that would like to go first in terms of the three presentations that you just heard? And the presenters asked some questions. At this time, if you have any early reactions to the questions that were asked, you can do so by raising your hands. Okay, I don't see any.
Marisa, maybe Michael Stanger, who participated in the meeting, in the webinar yesterday, can talk about the main questions or comments we had yesterday.
Okay.
More or less, all countries have the same problems or the same.
Yeah, I know, but I know that in our region we have some specific challenges. But I know Dr. Harrison has her hands raised. I don't know if she would like to go first.
I think so. I think so. Since no one else from the region, and before we hear from outside, first of all, I think, and Yvonne must say this has been a wonderful idea because, you know, to have this sort of engagement so that persons would know what is going on in terms of the update of the SNA. Normally it comes in the end, and then, you know, you are faced with this huge big volume that you have to implement. So I think it's a really good idea to have this session so early. And I want to thank both Michael and Herman and Federico as well for the questions raised and issues. So I was thinking about the following in terms of the region, right? Well, of course, I mentioned the issue about resources and what is happening from you know, recently, currently, in terms of the pandemic and the census, which is a huge exercise. But in terms of the specifics, I think areas of importance, the informal economy, right? That straddles a lot of our countries, and I think that is an important issue moving forward for CARICOM countries. I haven't heard much about tourism satellite accounts. I've heard about environment and whatnot and this year, but I think again, related to the COVID, you know what is happening with tourism and the fall off in tourism. So I want to say that. Well, I'm not too sure in terms of, you know, whether there will be need for any updates in this area. You know, given our recent experience, you know, with COVID and the lack of travel and all these things, you know, but I want to also put tourism on the thing. And I was happy to hear, I was waiting to hear, you know, whether this was included. And I heard Michael mentioned that we call it unpaid care and domestic work. Vitally important in terms of where the SNA is going with this issue, you know, and particularly from the context of mainstreaming gender, right? And so that I think is on our agenda in the region. And I would say, in terms of even some of the surveys that are being done now, as well as for the population and housing census, I believe it would be, some of the issues pertaining to unpaid care and housework would be or have already been have already commenced in the region in that regard. And the last but the ICT sector, right? The ICT as a sector, you know, so not just about the digitizations and whatnot, but having a satellite account for the ICT as a sector, we think that that is an important issue, as well as I'm not too sure if, you know, or how could we incorporate anything to do with food insecurity, right? So to me, those are some issues that again, the issue of food insecurity is one that we are working on in the region as well, and with the government of Italy as one example, and the FAO. So I think those are some of the issues that I would like to raise. Of course, in addition to all the attendant issue of our resources and the amount of support and hand holding that we would require moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Philomen. I think that maybe Michael from UNSD could take note about the main topics you raised. Michael, do you want to answer to Philomen?
Sure. In whatever I can. It's probably not all, and it won't be as satisfactory as I would like to. First of all, you are absolutely right, and you just hit the nail on the head. This is exactly what we want to do. We want to come with the news as soon as we can. So it won't be like last time around when we published the 2008 SNA, and then we were all crazy racing trying to implement whatever we could, and we are still in that phase. So that's exactly it. We want to bring this closer to countries and to the attention of countries, and to let everybody know that they can be part of this. But as we've mentioned, and it relates a little bit with what you said, we want to understand what the plans are. So for us, it's really relevant to know that you are running some household surveys, or there are plans to run household surveys, because some of the information that we need, that will be required for some of the updates, will be based on those household surveys, and even the census. It's really important. I think that's part of the thing. One of the things that as national accountants we tend to neglect, I would say, a little bit, but it's really important if we want to have these distributional accounts and have a focus on human beings and households. So presenting this since now, starting in 2021, if we know that you will have that there will be a round of population censuses, it's really important also for us to discuss with the countries and plan ahead and see how can we collaborate and try to make little changes here and there to your plans, so those big efforts and resources that will be spent on surveys will also help us starting to implement from now. The informal economy, and let me respond directly to what you said, is really relevant for many countries. And the way we measure or try to estimate the informal economy has different angles. But all those, I would say, are also or move also in parallel with the current developments of the national accounts. It's not that we are forgetting the 2008 SNA and we're starting blank to move towards the 2025. You know that. So we want to incorporate these things to the current programs. And when we talk about the collaboration between the international organizations, among the international organizations, it's also that we don't want to. There's so much work and too little people to do that work that we need to be efficient, and we don't want to duplicate the work. But I don't know if Ivo is here, but part of the experimental estimates components will be funded by the whole project. So if there's a country or two that it's doing something that relates to the update, but also touch on the development of 2008 SNA, we will be ready to support that work as well. Regarding the ICT sector, you again raise a very good point that relates to classifications. And as Ivo said, there's a lot of work going on also regarding classifications. So we need to coordinate and see if the ICT sector is going to be absolutely clearly identified from within the national accounts, or can be expanded as a satellite, that it's way more comprehensive. It would be way more comprehensive, but that relates to the digitalization, I would say, task teams. And some of the well-being and sustainability that will include the household surveys, services, and health and education are still being developed. But I would say that those will be presented or will be proposed as satellite accounts. They will not be proposed as an opening or a broadening of the boundaries of the SNA. This is the information I have for now, but they will come and they will be ready for consultation. I think that's what I have to say from yesterday and from the webinar that we had before with the African region, and I know of already from the other region, from the Middle East. I know that the informal economy is something that we need to tackle, and we definitely will have most likely a webinar devoted to informal economy. So countries will be welcome to share and to learn what's coming from the task teams. Claudia?
Thank you, Michael. And satellite accounts also are very important for, especially for Caribbean region and also for Central American countries. So I think that at least these two topics need to be addressed.
Ivo wants to talk, I think.
Just very briefly, since you, yes, I'm still here, and because this region is very close to my heart. So, and because we worked a lot with Philemon in the region, you know, I definitely, these are very good points. By the way, the ICT sector in its narrow definition is the narrow definition of the digital economy. So as a matter of fact, with that measurement, you know, we could start building up an understanding of the digital economy in the Caribbean region, which is an important first sort of step in the satellite account. I just made something to think about. It's also the labor accounts and the link of the labor accounts to households in terms of outcomes of economic activity that we increasingly want to measure in the well-being environment. Maybe also a topic and very relevant for the Caribbean region because it will allow us to extend on poverty and inequality measures, I think, that going forward. So there are, various great priority areas that we could explore going forward in a series of seminars with the countries to see where we want to go on some of these areas, distribution accounts and so on. So there are a couple of areas where I think, they could be extremely relevant and maybe less of a burden building on, the population and household surveys that are taking place in the region. I stop here.
Thank you, Ivo. Yes, you are right, and we need to address these issues. Due to time constraints, we will be able to make a 5 minutes break. So, Paula, I don't know who is going to put this clock in the.
Yes, I will.
You will? Okay, 5 minutes break only to start with the next session on country experience in the advisory expert group for national accounts. So see you in 5 minutes. Paula, can you share the clock?
Okay. Mami,
We will start up in 5 more minutes.
dame control, Sammy, para poner el reloj.
Session, we will talk about, or we will have an overview of national account statistics in Latin American and the Caribbean region. This presentation will be in charge of Janina Lopez, our colleague from the Statistics Division of ECLAC. Thank you, Janina. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Janina Lopez from ECLAC. Today, I'm going to talk about the context of national account for Latin American and the Caribbean countries. Nowadays, the system of national account 2008 has been adopted by 76% of the countries of the region, while countries like Barbados, Belize, Bolivia, Cuba, Honduras, Jamaica, Suriname, and Venezuela declare they still use the 93 system of national accounts, equivalent to 24%. In the region, there are 15 countries with their reference year of national accounts in 2000 decades and 15 in the 2010, while there are 3 countries in the 90s. On the other hand, the national accounts currently compile 3 types of valuation: current prices, constant prices based on a reference year, and also terms of change volume have been adopted by Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Dominican Republic. When we review the national accounts by approach and valuation in the region, currently we find in the Latin American countries a full dataset with GDP by activity and expenditure approach at current and constant prices. Even some countries present the values or indexes in terms of change volume. The situation changed in the Caribbean countries, where the main estimation of GDP is by activity at current prices. The GDP by expenditure is only available for Aruba, Anguilla, Bahamas, Belize, Bermuda, Bonaire, Curacao, Jamaica, and Suriname. All of them calculate and publish this measurement only at current prices. In relation with quarterly national accounts, we have 79% of the countries published this series, while 21% only publish with annual frequency. In relation with the quarterly national account by approach and valuation, we have 26 countries with this kind of measurement, where GDP by activity at current prices is indicated with more information in the region, while the GDP by expenditure approach at constant prices is the main challenges. The Latin American and the Caribbean GDP growth rate decreased in 6.8% in the last year, mainly by COVID-19 effect, where GDP growth for Caribbean decreased in 7.5%. Now, we can see the situation by country. The growth is negative for almost all economies of the region, where Barbados decreased in 18%. However, Guyana got a growth in 44% in the same year. So that is all for now. Thank you for your attention, and over to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Janina, for giving us this current status of the statistics in our region. And now we will move on to the country experiences in the advisory expert group meetings for national accounts. We will start with Argentina with Mr. Pedro Lines, Technical Director of INDEC, who will talk. We will talk about the Argentina experience. Please, Pedro, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As many of you don't know me, I'm Pedro Lines. I'm the technical director of INDEC, and I'm in charge of coordinating and developing the technical standards, procedures related to planning, designing, and implementation of all statistical operations carried out by INDEC Argentina. Last year, I was invited to be part of the advisory expert group on national accounts together with Gabriela from Costa Rica, and I found it as a great opportunity to express the views of the region and the topics that we discussed during the topics that we discussed in the meetings. The idea of this this talk is to share my experience. First of all, I want to express that it was a great opportunity, was an enriching experience, and the way we profit from this opportunity is that we organize in Argentina. We try to mimic or to replicate the spirit of the UN meeting. So before each of the AG meetings in Argentina, we organize something similar, meetings with members of INDEC and the other organizations, in order to debate all the topics and gather a variety of opinion and reach a consensus and have a country view on each the topic or theme that we discuss. We learn during this, not only in this meeting, but also in the meetings of the UN, we learn about the importance of communicating economic statistics to user using relevant tools and easier to understand language. So we reshape the way we disseminate our economic statistics. We introduce podcast, SDMX format for international accounts, balance of payment, documents explaining economic statistics in layman terms, infographics, and executive summaries to our report. We also learned from this process about the need of redesigning the statistical infrastructure to cope with the new issues or the issues that were pending from the implementation of the former or the actual SNA manual 2008. To start with, we detected that the importance or the need of a new classification of product, activities, assets, and occupation in order to do some experimental testing. We also detected the need of rethinking the way we plan and conduct census surveys and the use of administrative registers. And in order to, and we had to speed up all this process in order to do these experimental estimates. So last year, during the pandemic of COVID in Argentina, we launched the economic census that was completely done electronic. We just finished yesterday. We had more than 90%, 93% response rate. Now we are working in trying to contact the people who didn't answer the census, but it was a census that costed zero money, and this is establishing the foundations to modernize the infrastructure in order to incorporate all the recommendations, so try to do experimental estimates on these recommendations, because in order to sometimes to do this experimental estimate, you need some infrastructure, which is sometimes in some countries we don't have it. So first of all, we have to assess what is required. So in the case of Argentina, it was required to rethink the way we conduct census, not only the economic census, but also the population census, because we plan it in a way to combine them, to combine both of them to measure the informal sector. These two big operations will be complemented with economic surveys to enterprises and economic surveys to households. We are also launching this year the use of time survey. We're targeting all the households of the country, so it will have representation at the provinces level of the country. So all this, so the whole experience of being part of this group has sped up a lot of processes in Argentina, and also when we discuss this in our teams in the country, we stress about on the importance of the cost or what is required to follow these new recommendations. For example, in the case of the evaluations of import and export, it was easy because we already have all the information on invoice value or the transaction value of the import and export. So we can move from FOB/SIF to invoice value. But in other countries, this can be very difficult because you have to do a survey, and you survey the cost money, and plus you have to deal with the non-response because it's not an easy issue to cope with, because every time that you go for a survey, you have to think not only in the cost, but also how to cope with the non-response, how much the sample size, if you have the population frame, you have a correct population frame to do the survey. So this also has help us to start digging with the administrative, working with the administrative registers. But working with the administrative registers takes time. To learn and to profit from the administrative registers takes at least 1 year or 2 years, because you have to learn a little bit more about the statistical registers. This year we started working with the tax agency registers, and it's creating us a big headache, because in order to convert the statistical register, the administrative register, into a statistical register where you can extract information is very difficult. So so this is one of our main teachings, or the thing that we have learned from our experience from being part of this group. So mainly this is what I wanted to share with you, the whole idea of how these readings and gatherings encourage people to improve the way they work. So I encourage all of you to go to the website of the United Nations, where we have all the materials and all the documents that are discussed, the topics that we are discussing now, because this encourage all your team to to give a little bit more on these issues. And I understand that many of the issues are not feasible or they are not applicable for our economies in the region, because we don't have the level of sophistication in some financial instruments. So sometimes the discussions are a little bit deep in terms of instruments that we don't have, but in other countries we have these instruments. So it's a nice balance, but altogether it's a great experience, because encourage you to give a little bit more on what you are doing. So so what I wanted to deliver as a summary of this my participation in this seminar is that I encourage you to learn and to be involved in all this process of updating the SNA, balance of payment, and related statistics, because this can inspire all your teams, because sometimes we are dealing, as we are most of us in the statistical offices, we are not well paid. So this type of participations or contributions to the international discussion can be very grateful for the people. So sorry for my English, it's getting a little bit rusty lately. I haven't spoken in English for a long time. So basically my message is, it's good to participate. Try, if you receive any email with a global consultation, please be part of it, because you will profit more than what the world will profit from this participation. So more or less, this was my message of my participation in the AG group. So I encourage all of you to be part of this directly or indirectly. So as soon as we start the AG group or the United Nations and the community of organizations send you the invitation to participate, please don't refuse the option to participate.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you very much for your presentation, for your words, and for sharing with us the Argentina experience, which has incorporated these new technologies that you mentioned to carry out statistical operations, such as the census, surveys, and the use of statistical registers you mentioned, which have implied lower costs and improved the statistical work. So thank you for encouraging us to incorporate new ways to do things and to follow up this SNA revision process. So thank you again, and let's move on to Costa Rica. The experience of Costa Rica that will be in charge of Gabriela Saborio, National Accounts Branch of Central Bank of Costa Rica. Gabriela, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm going to share the presentation. Do you see my screen? Claudia?
We see your screen. We can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I'm going to talk about the experience of Costa Rica as a member of the AG. Costa Rica's involvement in the discussions has been extremely useful for the country. It's provided a more insightful recommendations to be considered. Many of these recommendations are data use intensive, so planning and prioritization in advance are highly considered, especially for a small country like Costa Rica. Some of the main topics of the review of the SNA are globalization, digitalization, well-being, and sustainability. I'm going to talk to you about some small steps that we have taken in these areas, especially in globalization. Some years ago, we had a request of academics and policymakers in the sense that incorporate in the supply and use table a breakdown between free zone and non-free zone, because in free zone there is a lot of multinationals that behave quite different from the other companies of the country. And in the new reference year, that is 2017, we shift to another breakdown that is foreign share and domestic control. We did this because in this process, we saw a lot of differences in the institutional accounts between multinationals and non-multinationals. So we did this breakdown in supply and use table, and in the integrated economic accounts in the supply use table, the breakdown was done in every economic activity. And this step allow us to obtain the global value chains satellite account. In the context of the testing that will be carried out, may be important to take into account some aspects of sample designs related with globalization. And in this experience, we learned that the importance for a small country like many of ours to streamline the process of production of statistics from the specific of needs to the evaluation. This entails also the development of software that would be more flexible in order to attain new products and some recommendations. In this sense, we have working on that, and it allows us to incorporate in the questionnaires some questions related to digital trade. We are asking to the companies in like 3 years about the percentage of sales and purchases carried out through digital channels. We are evaluating how important is the digital trade in the country. In the case of the software of export and imports, we did recently modification in order to pull out the import and export invoices, taking into account the SIF to FOB adjustment. So we are interested in analyze the convenience for the country to work with the invoices values. And in the topic of well-being and sustainability, we are completely interested in these issues. We are a small country, a developing country, and all this data is very helpful for us. In the case of health and education, we are coordinating with the tax authority to get detailed data about health and education. We are doing interesting advances in this aspect, especially in health. And in the case of distributive measures and unpaid work, we have been doing some researches with the support of World Bank in distributive measures for households. And in the case of unpaid work, we right now have the satellite account. We did it with the support of the Mexico. And in the case of the environmental issues, this is like any other of the recommendations that we are envisioning. This is a huge challenge for us. We have some environmental accounts, especially in water and land cover. So we want to tap into this data that is in physical terms, and we are analyzing to step out and estimate some stock, some balances for water and land use. And this is our experience, are small steps, but we are preparing for attending the recommendations that could be more important for our country. And I hope the experience of Costa Rica will be helpful for all of you. And thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Gabriela, for sharing with us Costa Rica experience on this globalization, digitalization, well-being, and sustainability, and the use of tax information that you mentioned. That is a great opportunity to collect information. So thank you for sharing with us your country experience. And now we will move on to Jamaica. Our colleague Carol Coy, Director General of Statistics Institute of Jamaica, will present or will give us some words on their experience in the AEG. Carol, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Claudia. My discussion is around what I feel is my role as I look at how I in the AG. I've been there. I have been a member of the. I can't remember when I joined, but I think I've been there quite a long time. And as was said earlier, I am part of the steering group on well-being and sustainability. I was co-chair, but because of workload, especially with the census, I relinquished that post because I don't think I was giving it the type of attention that it needed. But I'm still a member of that group because I think it's important for me as a member of CARICOM, a small island developing state, because what I find being a member of the AEG is a vast difference in capacity in producing national accounts between the developed world and developing, especially small island developing states. The disparity is wide, very, very wide. And so for me, I see the role there is to ensure that the group understands in moving forward, what are some of the drawbacks for small countries? The issue of us moving as, you know, getting on doing what is required. And so there has to be some tempering of the expectations of countries moving over in improvement into the system of national accounts. So I see that as a major role for me. What it has however, done for me, as our participant from Argentina mentioned, a significant portion of what is in the system of national accounts we do not do. Our focus mainly is on the the production account side of it. And so you are exposed to areas that you are not working on, you don't have the information, you have not worked on. But what it allows you is that you understand where you need to go as a statistical agency. And what is happening in our country, I know especially in the case of Jamaica, we have our stakeholders who are seeing what is out there, information. So even the distribution accounts, you have the central bank and the planning agency asking us to do these. So being on that, on the AEG allows you to see where you need to go, the information you need to get, how you need to move. And because the region is small, I look at it as an area of at least developing the expertise in a statistics office, and with South-South cooperation, maybe we can help some of the other countries in the region, because the issue for us is sometimes when we get technical assistance, I don't think they understand the shortage of data, that how do you work with what you have and how do you do it. So I see my role on it as one area, as trying to learn as much so that at least you can be a voice in the region that can provide some guidance, build our agency at Statin, and maybe provide some help to the rest of the region so that they can move forward with the national accounts. For us in Jamaica, we do a number of household surveys. So for example, we do a survey of living conditions every year. We have, in 2017, we did a household budget survey. In the 2018 survey of living conditions, we did a time use survey. So I see where we can use some of this information in some of the areas that we are proposing to move forward. What it also helps, and which is what maybe can encourage the region, is to participate in the when questionnaires are sent, when maybe the guidance note gets around, we need to read it, we need to participate in it, because it will help to build our capacity as national accountants in the region. So, for example, Jamaica, we participated in the globalization questionnaire. We have volunteered to participate in that issue of the use of the transaction values, because at Statin, we are currently revamping our trade processing system. And that is one of the areas which we are trying to incorporate in how to use the transaction values to help so that we can move from the FOB valuation. So that is basically how I see my participation in the AEG.
Thank you, Carol, for sharing with us your experience and the role of Jamaica you mentioned in the AAG is really important, as the statistical recommendation in national accounts need to consider the countries with less statistical development as our region, not only the Caribbean region, also Latin America, and is also in the same, more or less in the same, with the same problems. And thank you for encouraging other Caribbean countries to participate in this SNA revision process. It's really important to have them on board. So thank you for your words. Now we have some time, 15 minutes for question and comments. We hope that countries could express their interest or their questions or comments on what you said in the three presentations, and in this round of comments we will have our colleague Christopher Richard from CARICOM if there are some questions.
Hi, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Claudia. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, colleagues. So thank you all for those presentations, colleagues. They were, I must say, very informative and interesting. So we heard from our colleague from ECLAC regarding a brief status update on the status of national accounts in Latin America and the Caribbean. We heard that only 24% of countries were that 24% of countries were still using the 1993 SNA. And we heard that the growth rates for the 2020 had declined as to be expected due to the pandemic. Then we also heard the country experiences from Argentina, Costa Rica, and Jamaica relative to their experience in participating in the expert group on national accounts. The common thread that was running through all of those presentations was that they were encouraged that they all experienced benefits as being part of the expert group, and they've been encouraging countries to participate as much as possible. And when you get the questionnaires, to read those questionnaires, to respond to them. They can help to build capacity in your office. We've heard from Jamaica about the disparity, the difference in capacity between the small island states like our Caribbean countries and the more developed countries, and the role that Jamaica sees in being as part of that committee to help to build capacity in our countries through South-South cooperation. There was also Costa Rica looked at the 3 issues that they looked at were globalization, digitalization, well-being. They mentioned the unpaid work and that they were able to set up a satellite count to look at unpaid work. So that's just a brief summary of the presentations. I would now probably open the floor to participants if they have any questions or if they have any further comments that they would like to add. So colleagues, I'm now open the floor.
I don't see if there is any hand raised.
Don't see any hands right now. Jamaica, Carol?
The
floor is
Thanks,
yours.
Chris. I can't find the hand raising. No, the issue of countries expressing their interest, can it be something we do after this meeting? Because I think for a number of us, we might have to go back. We might have to, look at our work program and see where we can, rather than making a decision right here. So that was that's what I wanted to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe Michael, do you want to add something? What Carol said?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, absolutely. This is it's not something that we are pushing countries to decide right now. As we said at the beginning, we are presenting where we are at now, what we are doing, and absolutely, we are going to follow up with you. You will receive, and participants will receive an email from us summarizing a little bit of the meeting and explaining probably more about the Moodle side and so on. So absolutely, the answer is yes. We can wait, and obviously we'd be happy to support you going forward as well.
Are there any more countries? Any thoughts? Any
Chris?
Comments?
Chris, Argentina, Pedro Lines from Argentina wants to comment something.
No,
Okay.
I just want to make
yours.
Yes. No, I just want to make a comment about the importance of the government finance statistics. In most of our countries, government has a big role, and especially the participation in the GDP and most of the accounts, the government sector is a key player. So having a good GFS statistic help us a lot. And sometimes you have, as the colleague from Jamaica said, we have to deal with with few data, with bad quality of data. So we have not only we have to strengthen our national accounts, but also the related statistics, especially the GFS in our countries are sometimes, especially in countries where you have a federal countries where you don't have you cannot force the regional provinces or the regions to do what you want. So you have to do what you can't do with what they give you. So most of them, they are following GFS 86 manual. So it's very difficult if we don't improve all the statistics at the same time, not only the national accounts. So it's not only the national accounts, but also the GFS and the monetary and financial statistics also. This is something that we have to work and stress in all the forum or meetings, that the importance of the GFS statistics.
Thank you,
I don't know if you
Argentina.
agree. Yeah.
Belize, I see Belize. Belize, the floor is yours.
The name of the colleague from Belize, because we need that our IT
Hefte Ocheta.
Let me see. I can see the name.
Con J, Jefte.
Sí, Jefte Ocheta.
Amy or Rafael, can you move to panelists?
Thank you,
Okay.
everybody, for the presentations that you have shared with us. They're very informative. I really appreciate everything that we have been learning so far. So my question is towards mainly to get an advice. If it's basically, if you guys would advise for us to do our efforts in fulfilling the requirements of the SNA 2008 in preparation for any expectation that will come in the update version of the SNA 2008. Because in the meanwhile, like it was noted, countries like Belize has not really adopted SNA 2008 fully. And there are several avenues that we have already identified that we need to work towards to adapt SNA 2008. So yeah, that's basically a question. Should we work towards adopting SNA 2008 or wait for the updated version?
Chris, could I come in? My point is related to that.
Philomen?
Yep, I'd like Dr. Harrison can have the floor.
Yeah, the last point, thank you very much. I would like to thank all the presenters. Particularly thank Carol. Jamaica continues to put CARICOM on the map internationally, and that is really good. I also agree with her in terms of the volunteering to be after this meeting, and which is what Michael said. And also in terms of the South-South, as Kevin mentioned, we are trying to create centers of excellence, including national accounts. Of course, it has been stymied a bit by the COVID-19, but we hope that that would be a mechanism by which we can, have a more, what should I say, a more even implementation of future SNAs. And related to the last point that Belize made, yes, I was really surprised at the low percentage that is stated to be doing, well, low percentage for LAC, but specifically for CARICOM countries, because yeah, I think most countries have not implemented 2008 SNA in CARICOM to the best of my knowledge in terms of our figures, which I think we presented at the ICP meeting, Claudia. So it's probably good to look back at that presentation in that regard. And I want to think that countries are in a hybrid between 1993 and SNA, as Belize was saying, and therefore in that regard, his question is very pertinent in terms of, what do we do? Do we aim primarily to try to move to the 2008 SNA? And I believe that is perhaps on the discussion of the expert group, right? And so what do we do? Do we try to transition directly to 2025, or do we do a little conduit and move to 2008 SNA because there were only a few for the region when an assessment was done. At most, there were 10 recommendations that will seem to be important, and for some countries, as little as 4 or 5, right? So I think probably a focus could be on moving from 93 to 2008, you know, and then of course, you know, treating with the 2025 issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Philomen. Herman, do you want to share with us your opinion on what Philomen has said, or?
Yeah, no,
or Michael?
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our colleague from Belize that I would like to comment on in terms of the implementation. The issue of implementing, say, the 2008 SNA or the 2025 SNA, in our view, you should not wait, because I mean the recommendations that we will bring into the 2025 SNA, we will have the experimental estimates and guidance on how to deal with that going forward. But the implementation of the new version of the SNA is not so much important or more important than improving the statistical system. So in a sense, by implementing the 2008 SNA, you improve the underlying statistical system for that compilation. And for that reason, my view would be you should not wait for the 2025 SNA to come out and then so jump from 93 to 2025. I think that there's enough scope to improve your accounts. You could look at a bit at the scope, not only production, but also look at expenditure. And it's clearly there are other issues that you need to look at if we have a look at the volume measures. So there are elements, I think, that are important that you need to take into consideration without having this sword over your neck of a next SNA. The important issue is the scope and detail of the accounts that you would like to implement, and concentrate on that and improve that underlying statistical system for that scope and detail that is relevant for your country. Thanks.
Thank you, Herman. There is a comment in the chat. I agree with Herman. Do you want to tell to everybody your comment, Pedro?
No, yes, my comment in the chat was that we shouldn't wait to implement 2008 SNA, because it looks like that 2025 SNA won't change the central framework. So more or less it's the same. What we see with this new version is that we will see more details, more explanation on it, and they will clear out all these ambiguities that we had in 2008. But it won't change the manual. You have more granularity in the sectorization and in the granularity and in certain level of disaggregation of transactions, or creating new accounts like the work account. But it won't change the format as explained, as was explained by before by Miguel. So Felipe, sorry, Michael, sorry. So I won't wait to implement 2008. So it's something that we have to start, even if you don't follow all the requirements.
It's me, or we lost?
Hello?
Argentina?
We lost.
No, we lost.
It's okay.
Oh, there you go.
We lost just some moment.
Okay. Were you able to hear me? Because
Now, yes, we lost you for a moment.
Couldn't see you for. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
But
you,
it was
Pedro.
clear. Okay.
Any other comment or question? I don't see more comments in the chat. Or
Claudia?
yes.
If I may. Just a little short complement to what Herman said. Again, on the same line, we shouldn't wait. So the improvements of quality of the data and moving towards improvements of the compilation shouldn't stop, and we shouldn't wait. And I wanted to give the example of Brazil yesterday. They said something along the lines that they are updating the reference or the benchmark year during this period. So they will launch the new base year just before the publication of the 2025 SNA. So that's exactly what we're after now. If we are able to incorporate as most as possible into the new developments, capturing what's available from the 2025 is perfect, but that needs to run in parallel with all the plans that countries have to improve their national accounts, including recommendations from even from 93. So yeah, this is a continuum, and we want to basically incorporate new things as far as possible, but we shouldn't delay improvements because of the 2025.
Thank you, Michael. Any more comments and questions?
Yes.
Dr. Harrison?
Yeah.
You may have the floor.
Yeah, just to say, you know, particularly for the countries in the region, you know, whatever SNA they are following, one of the critical issues would be the strengthening of the data sources, right? Both the survey data, you know, that we were alluding to earlier, but also the administrative data sources. So I think fundamentally, you know, regardless of what SNA they're following, there is need for countries to also focus on that, because it would help in terms of the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Colleagues?
I think we are done. Or okay. Thank you, Chris, for conducting these sessions of comments. Let's move on to the final remarks of the meeting, of this webinar. The first, before the final remarks, our colleague Michael will show us the Moodle tool. Michael, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. This is very short for those that are still connected. We sent a link. I hope you are seeing this page. It's basically a very simple website based on Moodle technology, I would call it. It's the UN platform to conduct training. So we have created this website, this particular page, to put all the material that we are sharing with you and sharing it with the other regions, and we are putting all the presentations, the recording of the webinars and so on, and we will continue using the same platform going forward, particularly when we develop and deliver these thematic webinars. So you probably in the future will see here where it says thematic webinar, you will see informal economy, but we are going to include also Islamic finance and so on. So the link is there. I promised you that we will send an email, a follow-up email after this session, and we will include the link and a little explanatory piece of paper explaining how to enter here. It's just click the link and it will ask some questions and you will be in. Don't forget the password because then we have to recover it. But that's basically it. It's another way to share information with you and keep you updated.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We will try on this model tool. And now for final remarks, I would like to invite Mr. Ivo Javinga to close this webinar, to this first webinar. Ivo, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claudia, for moderating this meeting in such an excellent way. Thank you, and I like the decor and everything that you bring together on the screen. It was great. Let me just indicate that I thought this was a very great first kickoff of a series of meetings, in various ways. One is that we had not only let's say the agencies like the regional commissions and UNSD, presenting this way forward, but we had an engagement from Philemon, Dr. Philemon and his staff, Chris and others that really participated, but also from the region itself, from Carol Coy from Jamaica participating. We had Gabriela Saborio from Costa Rica, giving a great presentation, and Pedro Linas also giving a great presentation on the various sort of issues that we want to bring forward. And they shared an experience which I think is invaluable for us, and we should build on these sort of very important sort of aspects. And I will try to do that. What this context is of course that we are trying to reach out in a program that has to be done globally, but at the same time we want to make sure that when we think about these broader updates, that the small island development states are well represented in these updates, right? And I think we did that, and I think we have to be first very well listening what, for instance, Philemon very clearly indicated. I do have priorities, and they may not be immediately in terminology translated as you guys are thinking when you think about the update. But I would like to say to Philemon, my work is not only about updating manuals, it's also about capacity building. So there is a broader program than only the update of the manual. But she said very important things, and Carol and others mentioned that also. And let me just try to grab back. So she said informal economy is important. And of course it is important. It is a major portion of any economy in the small island development states. Tourism is, a very high percentage of the economy, direct or indirectly. And she says, I'd like to hear that. I like you to hear this. This is where I sit. You don't talk my language. Why are we different? She said, look, I come out of COVID. I'm in the middle of COVID. Food security is on the top of my agenda. So, where is the conversation when you think about well-being, and where is food security in the update of the SNA? This is important. And she said, look, guys, you're competing with me. In the program that we have a census and household program. We have to go forward. This is essential, particularly in these times, that we get a nice count of population and see how they and where they are and what their origins are and all their social demographic characteristics. And now you come up with this large revision process. So you have to help me to translate this as being, not at the same level as the population audit says, but being important. And I think that is where we have to try to bring that conversation going forward and getting a much higher percentage of countries to participate, because that is what we want. We want the countries to be there, and we saw Belize and Jamaica being there, and Costa Rica and Argentina, but we should try to get, and these are early entry countries, and Jamaica, of course, was there. So it is important to think about what was said by Philemon. I also want to say that I listened very carefully of what Carol was saying, and she said something that is important. There's a lot of work being done also in time use. There's a lot of work being done, time use surveys and the collection of that. Maybe not as current as today, but they have done and have the experience. He says, I do have experience in household surveys, and I know that there's a lot of work being done in that area, and we have to develop that. That links up to a lot of things like, unpaid household work, but also to the population conditions that we want to inform in well-being, and particularly the labor accounts. Now, let me just give a reflection on what they were saying. How does that now translate of what they feel definitely is the top priority in a small island development state? And how can we translate that? I would think tourism would be a good case. So tourism is on the front. Yeah, by way of example, where tourism, the labor accounts is part of our work in the update to better bring all the data together in terms of labor force surveys, household surveys, enterprise surveys, and develop a consistent labor account. We could say, let's be humble. Let's do it not for the whole economy. Let's focus only on there where the TSA maybe is important, and maybe we focus even more to hotels and restaurants. We don't have to do everything, but at least start to show what the importance is of these particular sort of more modest sort of attempts in experimentation and testing that we could bear and bring forward in our thinking. The same is about GVCs. It sounds very big, but a lot of these hotels and restaurants and other sort of economic activities and tourism are very related to global value chains. What can we do in the island development states to actually bring that together, maybe at a way that immediately speaks to their interests. Food security, we can work with FAO and we can develop this and see how this has to be better integrated. This is maybe a new element that becomes in the consultation with small island development state that they feel is underestimated in how we want to develop our macro accounts. So these are new sort of topics that we have to reflect on, and coming back to the AEG and say, look, we hear this. They're very clear. We have to try to translate in our conversations on these sort of topics that are very important to reach, to make first clear for ourselves that we understand the challenges and the constraints that they face, and that we set the expectations also in the experimentation and testing at a level that we can actually, seek volunteers from countries, because it's still a large group of countries that can volunteer and move things forward. Now, on the fact, and that is a very important discussion that we haven't brought forward now, there's a whole discussion, Carol and knows that, but of course others that are on the call that are part of the AEG process. But maybe Philemon is less being informed about that. There's a whole discussion around communication of the SNA. One of that is exactly what was discussed today. If I am at 1993 SNA, or if I'm at 2008 SNA, am I worse off at the 1993 SNA than the 2008 SNA? Probably not, because nobody asked you to develop from 1993 to 2000 SNA. So why do we seem harping about the fact of what year you're at in terms of benchmark? It is important that you are able to say, I develop an SNA that is, meeting the demands of my users. And that is where I am. So the next step to 2025 should not be another sort of rally for competition you know, from 93, 2008 to the 2020, 25. We have to have a communication about that in a way that it is very important. So the branding of our programs is important, and maybe we have to think about what that actually is, also in terms of terminology, which I think is very important also in the Caribbean environment. Why do we always come up with these very complicated sort of concepts and definitions that doesn't translate back to the person that really has to start using it for policy analysis? This is a major discussion that comes forward in the communication element of this revision that we have to be, you know, bringing forward, which I think would be very interesting for the countries to be more interested in participating in these meetings. I would like to leave it at that. I see there is a lot of potential in aligning our program and our conversation with the small island development states in a way that it translates very well to their programs and their interests and priorities, and seeing there where we can experiment and test in environments that we find commonly of interest. And tourism, food balances, informal economy is definitely an element that we are. Those that want to be more aspirational and want to develop a little bit more because they have the capacity in terms of time use surveys, let's try to activate that. And I was very heartened by the fact that South-South cooperation is still standing very strong. And I agree totally. If you send me to the small island development states, I have a view, but I'm not part of that community. I don't know all the constraints. So you better send your own people to make sure that this is going to happen. We can help, you know, bringing the dialogue forward, and we can play an important role, I think, in bringing the communities together, because we still have a very strong capability of, you know, bringing people together and organizing meetings. But the conversations has to be held among themselves. That I've learned again today. Now, I thought it was a wonderful conversation, and I think we have to look forward to the next thematic one. And I definitely do, because I strongly believe in the spirit of the Caribbean. So looking forward, going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivo, for your nice words, for finalize this meeting, this webinar. I would like to thank all those who participate in this webinar, especially our colleagues from CARICOM, from UNSD, from ECLAC, and all the country representatives who were here today. And also thank our colleagues from IT, Sami and Rafael, who made this webinar possible. So thank you. And before we say goodbye, we would like to ask you to turn on your cameras to take a group photo. Is that possible? Can you, because all of us can do this.